Hi, how's it going? My name is Matt. I'm a co-founder of Boosted Boards, the world's lightest electric vehicle. And it's my pleasure to introduce to you Alexis Ohanian. He is going to be talking to you about tales of US entrepreneurship outside of Silicon Valley. And I'm from Kansas, and so he wanted me to share with you my story. So I remember using my parents' dial-up internet connection to find out all the latest innovations happening in transportation. I was really into airplanes, and I'd read about Cirrus and Eclipse, which were startups promising to bring flying cars and flying taxis and personal jets. Also reading about electric vehicles like the Segway, and just the whole maker movement of people building their own robotic projects. And this is really what inspired me to dream of hoverboards and my own perfect electric vehicle. So I eventually connected with my other co-founders, John and Sanjay, who had similar ideas in a very lightweight, portable urban transport, and we started Boosted Boards. We crowdfunded the Boosted Boards last fall using Kickstarter, and that's kind of where we're at right now. So my story from going from Kansas to co-founder of Boosted Boards was largely affected by the open internet. And it was through Boosted that I met Alexis. And many of you guys know Alexis as the founder of Reddit. Since then, he's started a social enterprise called BreadPig. He's also helped his Reddit co-founder, Steve Huffman, with the travel search site Hipmunk. He's the Y Combinator ambassador in the East. He has also invested in over 80 companies. And lately, he's been fighting for internet freedom and making sure that every politician knows how important the open internet is to all of his constituents. So with that, let's go ahead and welcome Alexis.
Oh, thank you, sir.
Yeah.
I'm very happy I did not decide to ride out on the Boosted board. That would have been very entertaining for all of you, but a very bad decision on my part. Thank you, Matthew. Can we give it one more time for the fact that he has created the greatest, lightest electric vehicle in the world, and a product of Kansas. And I was really excited because I was like, dude, I hope you've got some Kansas swag that you could wear on stage. And he's like, yeah, which one do I choose? The pride there is so obvious. And what I want to do today is dispel a few myths. I went on a bus tour, which was really exciting. I pushed the wrong button. I went on a bus tour over this past fall, and what you saw there was a taste, was a clip, a few clips from the film that came out of it. Silicon Prairie is not yet available for download, but it will be soon. I wanted to give you guys a little something to see when it's available for download. Pay what you want, of course. I'll be uploading a version to Pirate Bay myself. We want these ideas to spread. And one of the big reasons we want that is because we know that the internet is good for America. It's good for American jobs. It's good for the American economy. What am I doing here talking about this stuff? I am, first and foremost, a startup guy. You heard about some of the stuff I've worked on. This is one of the first things I've been involved with that does not have a cute mascot that I've drawn, so it was a big change of pace for me. But the reason that I get to do the stuff that I can do and have the great fortune is because when Steve and I started, that's us, at the very beginning of Y Combinator, we were undergrads at the University of Virginia in Charlottesville. And we had some ideas. We were able to apply to Y Combinator, which was back in Boston. When we visited, we realized this is where we needed to be, and we were accepted after getting rejected and moved up to Somerville, Massachusetts. And this tale of entrepreneurship, our own tale of entrepreneurship, never included the phrase Silicon Valley, right? It never included that phrase. We were lucky enough to have success outside of it. And I'm just curious, we'll do a little voting right now. How many of you all here are not from the Bay Area? Can I get a show of hands? Yes! All right, now there could be some selection bias here because you've decided to come to this talk, but let's throw out statistics and just acknowledge the fact that nearly everyone raised their hand, all right? And this is the reality of the internet economy, right? And one of the reasons why this has been so vexing for me is that you may have remembered during SOPA and PIPA, one of the refrains we heard all the time was Silicon Valley versus Hollywood. The way the entertainment industry positioned this, it was their noble efforts to fight piracy against some troublesome nerds in Silicon Valley. They were the ones stopping this thing. It was a few tech companies, they said, right? And while that's a good headline, it's not true. Like a lot of things in Hollywood, it doesn't really match up with historical reality. I can assure you the Battle of Thermopylae went nothing like the film 300. But the fact is, we have a tremendous opportunity because the internet really helps level the playing field, and it lets normal people get up on stage, it lets normal people show up and protest, it lets normal people sign petitions and actually do something that was unthinkable in the face of really, really overwhelming odds. This chart here may depress you. It's from Media Matters, and it talks about media coverage of SOPA and PIPA versus other stories. Spoiler, SOPA is on the far right, if you can't read it, with 2. And this was during months of the most intense fighting against these 2 bills. When the internet was full of stories, the British royal family led the way on the mainstream media, followed by Tim Tebow, who is still a mediocre quarterback at best. Casey Anthony, am I right? I mean, and what's sad is I live in New York now, and so I have to hear Jets fans complaining all the time about that decision. But anyway, the Alec Baldwin plane incident, remember? Words with Friends, right? And as an Armenian, this pains me. The Kardashian divorce still got more attention on the news. Now, this shouldn't surprise anyone because if you looked at the companies that were backing these bills, they also owned large media organizations, and so in some way had some impact on what was being covered. You could argue that the Kardashian divorce is not more important than SOPA. I think that's a pretty reasonable argument, but that's okay. And so you see things like this, and I'm saying them because this does not happen without a bunch of people able to get the job done, all right? There were people who were told were leaders of this thing. This was a leaderful movement. It was millions of people. Not the ones who were on TV, not the ones who got interviewed, millions of people who actually got involved with their government who got this done, all right? And so if you didn't feel good about it, all right? But that doesn't mean we're done, just the first step. We said these bills shall not pass, and that was awesome. But what have we done in the years since? What have we done to proactively move for good legislation that actually helps us get more freedom to innovate, the kind of stuff that we saw in that video, to make sure that every single one of our elected officials knows that they represent a digital district? Not just districts in Silicon Valley, every district in America is a digital district, and this matters. And so I was talking with Erik Martin, who pictured here is the general manager of Reddit, and we were having burgers, and we were talking about what we could do, and it was last fall, and we thought, why don't we get a bus, like a campaign-style bus? We could actually crowdfund a bunch of money, just like we did with this billboard. Actually, to show that South by is good for things other than just drinking, during a drinking event at South by last year, a bunch of us started talking and realized we should actually fundraise on CrowdTilt a billboard right outside the offices of Lamar Smith, the father of SOPA, just so he knows, or at least his employees know, you don't mess with the internet. So we actually had enough money raised to get 2 billboards outside of 2 of his offices here in Texas. And so we thought, let's do this again. So we crowdfunded a bus. This was kind of a crazy endeavor, but Erik's full of great ideas, and we pulled it off. We actually were able to convince a bunch of journalists to join us on this bus ride from Denver to Danville, and of course, a documentary crew. You saw a clip. Nibblebot was the awesome team that volunteered to send a half dozen people to film and direct and edit and make all this wonderful stuff into that documentary you saw. And we met companies all over who with open arms welcomed us into their offices. We went to meetups. We did none of the planning for this. We simply said, hey, we're taking this bus trip. If we're stopping by your town, let us know. Very internet, right? And so we met companies that were doing manufacturing for these future. If you could start Lego from scratch today, you would make them cubelets, because each cube represents a different kind of robot, right? One that represents power, one that is a meter, one that flashes, one that makes noise. And as you stick them together, you are creating little robots that can do everything from spin around in a circle with a strobe light to battle, like on BattleBots, right? These are the toys we wish we had growing up, but that are being manufactured in America. Thanks to some 3D printing technology, thanks to some clever engineers and people, these companies are starting here, and they're all over. And we got to meet meetups in Boulder, and we brought a giant declaration of internet freedom with us and got people to sign it. And it was incredible to see how much people cared. We got to go to high school football games and see the way that entrepreneurs were not only rebuilding their downtowns, like you saw with Scarlett Garnett, but were also helping high school football coaches save their marriages. What do I mean by that? Well, it turns out most of these high school football coaches spent so much time editing and cutting video that Huddle, H-U-D-L, now saves them all of that time that they can spend with their significant others not editing game footage. And it's giving kids all over the country access to the kind of high quality highlight reel that used to only be reserved for the kids who could afford it. So it's leveling the playing field in football, and as a diehard football fan, I like knowing that that exists, right? We met truckers in random rest stops who, when we told them what we were about, they said, I want to join you, but I have this delivery to make. All right, this is a truly bipartisan issue. The good folks at Douala actually shut down a bridge in Des Moines, because if there's something Iowans are awesome at, it is absolutely caucusing. And so they shut down a freaking bridge. And we heard from folks, we heard from pig farmers like Carl, who told us about how crowdfunding was changing the way he was thinking about raising hogs, all right? We worked with the folks at Local Motors, whose rally car you hopefully have seen rolling around here, that are creating locally manufactured automobiles. That's right, totally manufactured in the United States, but crowdsourced, designed on the internet. So they take contributions from designers all over the World Wide Web, and instead of making a cool shirt like on Threadless, they make cars, awesome cars. This is all stuff that is now possible. And we're starting to see significant changes, right? We're seeing Google actually show that those telecoms who said it couldn't be done, reasonable, affordable fiber couldn't be done, were full of malarkey, right? Google Fiber shows up in Kansas City, and all of a sudden you've got homes that are showing up, opening their doors to hackers who want to start companies, and you have neighborhoods who now have access to terabyte speed downloads, or gigabyte speed downloads. That'd be incredible. The reality is this is changing, and right now companies and governments are thinking about this, but not nearly as much as they need to. So that's why we made this film. We screened it in DC, we had 4 sitting representatives there, and it was incredible. We want these memes, we want these ideas to spread, because every government official needs to know, every one of them, that the internet matters, and it matters in every one of their districts. And so when you see this meme, when you see it propagated, when you see it spread, I want you to think malarkey. All right, anytime it's brought up, just say it. It feels really good. Say it, please. Malarkey. Malarkey. It is, because it is not just Silicon Valley versus Hollywood. It is Hollywood versus everyone. All right? And we can win this. We can win this. And I learned something from Ben Huh, who, of course, is the CEO of Cheeseburger. Now, Ben joined us for a portion of the bus tour, and he turned me on to an app that I have been demoing that I really like. It's called Contact Congress. And I know this is a rule. You're not supposed to do this during talks. I'm not going to ask anyone's permission for this. I'm going to try to make a phone call. So what's incredible about Contact Congress is it's a very simple app. The premise of the app is this. No matter where you are, you can locate your representative in your 2 centers based on your geolocation. So I still have it set for Brooklyn. Now, I have a representative there who has not yet responded to my query about whether or not she's going to support Sxsw. Now, if you don't know about Sxsw, give it a Google. You can decide for yourself. But I feel like it has not taken into any consideration my 4th Amendment rights to privacy. If you want to see my private digital goods, due process, please, get a warrant. So I haven't heard anything about it, and this is an important issue, so I'm going to try this on stage. With a push of a button, you can just call their office, all right? Can you guys hear this? Hello, my name is Alexis Ohanian. I live in the district, and I still haven't heard back about how the representative is going to be voting on Sxsw. I'm really worried about my 4th Amendment rights to privacy online.
I'm sorry, voting on what, sir?
Sxsw?
I'm not quite, haven't heard of that yet. What is that exactly?
That's okay. Well, so here's the thing. The Cyber Intelligence Security and Protection Act is something, I called about it last week. I got an email address from someone in the office. Is there, and I followed up with an email, is there any way I could maybe get an answer on that?
Okay, that's fine. Whose email did you get? Do you know?
Melissa, I don't want to blow up her spot. I think it was Melissa Johnson.
Okay. And what is the bill exactly? I apologize for all this.
Oh, well, this is kind of awkward. I don't have a ton of time. I know that this sounds kind of weird. Can I call back in a little bit? But if you Google it, I've got 30 minutes before I have to get off stage.
SISPA?
Yes?
That's the act, Sxsw?
Yes, Sxsw. Cyber Intelligence Security and Protection Act.
Okay, well, the other thing is that at 6 o'clock, our phones go straight to voicemail because the offices generally close up, especially on a Friday, so I would suggest calling back before then.
Okay, all right, I will. I'll follow up with another email too.
Okay, and what's your name?
Alexis Ohanian.
Okay. Well, call back. I can hopefully help you out, okay?
Okay, thank you very much.
And have a good one.
All right, you too. Okay, so it's a little nerve-wracking. So here's the thing, and the reason I bring this up, and I still really want to know how she feels about Sxsw. The reason I bring this up is one of the great advantages to living in a world where right now, sorry Kim, you can see what Kim Kardashian is having for breakfast, is that we have a new level of expectation, right? If I can see what a total stranger celebrity had for breakfast right now, 24/7, shouldn't I know what my elected officials are doing? Shouldn't I know how they feel about things? Like, shouldn't I have that same sense of entitlement? I think that's reasonable, right? These people work for us. We hire them, we fire them, we pay their salaries. So why not use technology to give us the strength that we deserve, right? I mean, this was something that became so readily apparent to me on this bus tour as I was speaking to hundreds of University of Nebraska students who, when we called up their representative and asked about SOPA, we got voicemail, unfortunately. I think it was after hours. But it was so clear and so apparent that this mindset seemed very reasonable. In fact, what we saw during SOPA Pippa was a bunch of people who had never really taken action, but who realized once they made the first phone call, hey, it's not that bad, actually. They're really polite, they're really friendly, and with some luck, you can win. You can actually have them hear you. So that was the unscripted live demo we haven't heard yet about Sxsw. I encourage you all to take a look and then decide whether or not you want to lend your axe to this battle, but you have mine. Now, there's another myth that I am just sick and tired of hearing about that I hope I can also do a pretty good job dispelling in the next 15 minutes. This is a quote from the head of the RIAA from about a decade ago. And this was a response to a question about whether or not the RIAA was still as relevant in a world with the internet. And he says, and I want to point out something very particular, it's about being fair in regards to the ability of people to get paid for their work. Fair. Now I want you to just remember that word. I was in a debate, a Fast Company debate, just a few months after SOPA and Pippa with a professor named Jonathan Taplin. And this debate was sort of talking about now post-SOPA, post-Pippa, what's the next step? How do we find a way to help the internet, well, to help the entertainment industry understand the internet? And one of my themes was, and I think this is fair use, one of my themes was that the times are changing. And most businesses, when times change, adapt to those changes. And I know this firsthand. My father actually has been a travel agent for the last 30 years. A travel agent, right? How novel. And I grew up at a time when the internet was drinking his milkshake. I grew up with him coming home from work saying, the airlines have cut my fares, my commissions to zero. The internet is changing everything. And what impressed me so much was my dad's response to that, like many others in his industry, was not go call a lawyer. It was not go to K Street and get a lobbyist. It was adapt his business, right? That doesn't seem like every other business person in the country gets that, right? The natural order of things is, oh, right, I'm going to adapt. But for decades, it's the exact opposite of what the industry has been doing. In fact, if you were to do a case study, a Harvard Business School case study on the entertainment industry over the last 60 years, it would be really boring because it would be like consumer preferences have changed to a new device or technology. Call lawyer. New consumer demand, call lobbyists. Like that's just shitty business advice, right? That's nothing really remarkable, is it? And to my dad's credit, shameless plug, he's still in business because he adapted it, and I'm incredibly proud of him for it. But that's what we should expect. Why do we not expect that of an industry that has resisted adapting their business using innovation and instead has gone to legislation? Well, it's because they want fairness. It's because they want artists to be in a world that is fair. All right, right now, we're at the infancy of what this new technology can bring, right? I love the fact that I already live in a world where my buddies, Daft Punk tribute via New Orleans brass band, can raise $20,000 and come to fruition. That's one art project, one of many. I don't need to tell you guys about Kickstarter. This is just the beginning. This is not an end point. This is a hope for what is to come. Amanda Palmer did a fabulous TED Talk that you should all watch about the idea of artists knowing how to ask. And she has been, without a doubt, a pioneer in this world, right? 1 million raised on Kickstarter. But there are people who are adapting right now in the face of everything, and others who aren't. And so during that debate, when I brought up all these points, I was met with some resistance from people who I don't think really appreciate or really truly understand how much this technology actually enables artists to connect directly with their fans. So during this debate, I was reminded of a photo that went viral. It went to the front page of Our Music and sort of spread all over Facebook and Twitter. And it was a photo that just months after SOPA Pippa really struck a nerve with me and millions of other people. It's the story of a singer named Lester Chambers. Lester Chambers was a member of the Chambers Brothers, who have produced some incredible hits, like rock legends. That was a gold record he was holding in front of his face. But in spite of all that success, in spite of all that awesomeness, he got paid next to nothing for decades. And when he would call, when he would plea, they would say, ha, 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 go get a lawyer, go, good luck, it'll take decades, you'll never get the money. And that one photo encapsulated everything that was wrong with the old model and all of the hope for what was right with an internet-enabled one. So on a whim, I was like, hey, maybe we could go out to California, meet with Lester, and he'd let me put together a Kickstarter campaign for him. And at the time, it seemed outlandish, because like, some internet guy wants to talk to a rock legend, but it worked. And he said, sure, come out. So I talked to my buddy Lerone, we flew out there, he's a documentarian, and we shot some footage, and we met with Lester and his son Dylan. And I sat down in his home, they very graciously welcomed me into their home, and told me the story of just what it was like at Columbia Records. And I can't even begin, there's not enough time to go into the detail of it, but I mean, the anecdotes he would tell, because at some point the Chambers Brothers had fallen out of favor with Columbia Records, and they were going out of their way to sabotage this band, so much that they would actually send them to empty lots with a bunch of records, just saying, "Oh, get rid of them, whatever, good luck." The band was being sabotaged, like I said, being sent out to these empty lots, and then even when they were getting paid, Lester wasn't getting any money. But the most egregious thing during that interview, the one that just like that just appalled me, was that when this record came out, so Time Has Come is the hit. You all know it. It's seared into your brain somewhere from film or video games or somewhere. When this album first came out, you can imagine the Chambers Brothers were so thrilled. Like, this is their big record. This is what they've been working for so long as musicians. Chambers Brothers get a first look at this record, and there are a bunch of white guys on the cover. And they ask, who the hell are these guys? And the record company explains, no, we didn't think the audience was ready to see you all. They're all black. They weren't ready to see you all on the cover of this album called Time Has Come. We think this is in the best interests of the album and you all to not have your own faces on the fucking album cover, right? Bullshit. And so the brothers fought back until eventually they earned the right to get their own faces on the album cover. Fuck that, right? How is this a model we want to see continue to exist? And so I offered Lester a humble alternative that was not going to make amends for decades worth of abuse. But the internet's pretty good at making supply meet demand. And I thought, Lester can still make music. He's still performing. I saw him perform last week. He still rocks. And so I thought, can you put together an album? We can draw this up, we can get this together, and we can actually make it so. And so we put together a Kickstarter campaign. And here's old media coming to the bat. All right, CNN.com puts it on the front page. How awesome is this? Puts it on the front page on Christmas Eve. The next day, they are actually on CNN talking about this injustice and talking about this change because Lester's time had come, because we'd actually put together a campaign that raised $61,000, and that money all went to Lester, minus a few fees for Amazon and Kickstarter, but they earned it. And I'm talking to Lester about this, and I really can't even do it justice because quoting him does not do it justice. He is in awe of this. But at the core of it, he knows the reason it works is because it connects artists directly to their fans. It doesn't let anyone get in the way, some of whom historically have been total assholes, and some of whom historically have at least been somewhat not great, right? And so when I see things and when I hear things about the reason we do this, the reason we fight for SOPA and PIPA, the reason we're pushing to curb piracy is because we care about artists. You know what I think about that. When I see things like we just want to be fair, you know what I think? Malarkey. Absolute malarkey. And so I hope there's been enough evidence here for you to see that those two myths are basically full of malarkey. What would I do without Vice President Biden making this word cool again? All right? And so what makes the internet so great, and what you heard in that video, what you saw with Matthew, was this ability to create, this freedom to create. If you have an idea for a New Orleans Daft Punk jazz tribute album, cool, put it up there. See if you can get it funded. And if you have an audience that's willing to give you money, start doing it. That's great. Why not? Because it's gonna mean better things. It's gonna mean people being free to take chances, to be creative, and to innovate. And that's what this is all about. That's what the power of the open internet is, because it used to be gatekeepers. It used to be people who needed to grant you some permission for the opportunity to innovate, some permission for the opportunity for you to create. And right now, that's falling. Right now, it's changing. And it's an exciting time, but we don't know where it's going. This is still the earliest days. We are still sort of in the frontier parts of the internet right now, because it could go one of two ways. It could go a way that leads to more innovation, more creativity, more people getting access than ever before. And access is an important word. You should look at any of the work done by Susan Crawford to see just how much access is still a problem. In a country that ironically leads the world in terms of internet innovation, our internet is second rate. Our speeds are too slow, our costs are too high, and our access is still not available to millions of Americans. If you live in rural America, good luck. Broadband's not even an option for millions. Not to mention the fact that I've got my fellow citizens in Brooklyn who can't afford a reasonable internet connection, and yet I want to live in a world, I want to live in a country, first and foremost, where electricity, where an internet connection should be accessible. And access matters, and once you've got access, it's a matter of having the skills, and that's why STEM education has been making, I think, such great strides, because we all realize we would not be here. I certainly wouldn't be on this stage if I didn't have the opportunities that I was handed to me. Opportunities that I didn't necessarily earn, but opportunities that I had that I want to see everyone else have. And so what excites me, and the reason I think we're all here and we're all so hopeful, is that what this will lead to is power. What this will lead to, if we get it right, is that the internet can live up to its fullest potential. The internet can actually provide the place where good ideas can win and where we can actually hear from people who we historically have not heard from. But we're not there yet. We're working towards it. There are a lot of people working really hard on getting this. But I think the reason why it's so exciting is because of the power that it entails. The power it is for you to be able to say something to your government and have your government listen. The power for you to be able to create a company that you think should exist and actually create it. The power for you to create art that you think should exist and for other people to say, yep, we want that to exist too. So this is what has me so excited. This is why I'm so optimistic about the future of the internet and why I think ultimately we're going to win. But it's time for questions. And a shameless plug, my book is now available for pre-order on Amazon. So if you like what I have to say, tweet at me, we'll talk about it some more. And I very humbly ask that you consider pre-ordering my book. Thank you.
Hello?
I need some water.
Go for it. Hey everyone, with the good help of Mass Relevance, today our Q&As will be facilitated by Twitter and using the hashtag #AskOhanian. So.
Would you like me to sit? Or?
Sure.
The whole time I saw the chair and I didn't know if this was like a Clint Eastwood bit or what. Is this comfortable or is this a little weird? Okay.
Okay. First question today is asked by the Sean Breezy. What can I do to help keep the internet an open platform?
You can get to know your representatives. You can download Contact Congress. You can sign up for the Internet Defense League, which was started by some awesome people at Fight for the Future. And you can give a read to the Declaration of Internet Freedom, and if you like what it has to say, you should sign it. But most importantly is that first issue, which is if you're not going to run for office, which is important, we need more nerds in office. One of my favorite moments actually there were not a lot of highlights during the House Judiciary Committee meeting during SOPA, but was when Representative Chaffetz from Utah said, bring in the nerds. Now Jon Stewart made a good point about this, which was if it were any other type of expert, they wouldn't have called us nerds, but it was this fact that people had to acknowledge that the legislators in the room didn't understand what they were talking about. If we had legislators in office who actually had a deep understanding of technology, this would make a world of difference. But if some of you are not old enough to run for office, the most important thing you can do is be in touch with those elected officials. Because like I said, they're our employees. They're absolutely our employees. And what SOPA showed was that in the face of $94 million in lobbying from the entertainment industry, people could win.
Thanks. The next question is by Camp Interactive. What advice do you have for teens learning code on how to embrace the entrepreneur spirit?
I love Camp Interactive. So I had the privilege of hosting a hackathon for them in New York. They work to make sure that urban youth get access to technology as well as nature. And I don't get enough access to the latter, that's for sure. Programs like Camp Interactive are fabulous. What is so impressive to me are these organizations, these nonprofits that are dedicated solely to making sure that programming education is something worth thinking about. Seeing Code.org's viral video, if you haven't seen it yet, it's everyone from Zuckerberg and Houston to Will.i.am talking about the importance of learning how to code. It is part of propaganda battle. Part of it is getting the word out, but a big part of it is simply giving access to kids who wouldn't normally have it before. So I guess that at the core of it, what is so empowering about learning how to write software is that compared to the boring classwork you might do, you could build something on this or an Android device and actually have something to show your friends the next day and actually have something to show your parents and your peers, and it doesn't feel abstract, it feels real, and millions of people could use it. That kind of empowerment, unfortunately, is still not ubiquitous in our education system. And what worries me the most is that for those who are most fluent and have the most access right now, it is going to mean tremendous opportunity for basically wealth creation. And the risk is we leave behind a very significant chunk of the population that already is encumbered and widen the gap even more so, because tech literacy is going to become almost mandatory if you want a job in the 21st century.
Next question by Mason Stewart. With open source, sharing and transparency pushing new boundaries, how do you see the future of privacy?
Oh man, that's a dilly of a pickle. Okay, so the sharing transparency is interesting because, so Sxsw, for instance, so the main grievance with Sxsw, at least for me and many others, is that there is no, if you wanted access to my private information, if you wanted access into my home or you wanted access into my mailbox, you could do that with due process, with a warrant, with a judge, and that's a reasonable way to live. It still looks out for our Fourth Amendment rights to privacy. For some reason, digital stuff hasn't made the leap. Like, people don't yet think that there is not enough understanding that my digital inbox is just the same as my mail inbox, and my Dropbox is just like my home in a sense, and that same need for due process has to be there. I think what is a challenge for us is that we had allies for SOPA and PIPA like Google. Actually, Facebook wasn't really there, but Google and Facebook now are very much lobbied up in Washington, so to speak. And there are issues where they will agree with us, the internet public, and there are issues where they will not, because they are looking out for the best interests of their shareholders. And that, they're companies, that's what they do. We need to make sure that they are looking at, we need to make sure that we are looking out for the best interests of the internet public. Because if you remember last year, Sxsw was something that Facebook was supporting because they presumably didn't want to have to deal with, they wanted to be very happy to be removed from any responsibility as they handed over any kind of private information. So we need to hold them accountable. And if we have to go on Bloomberg during their IPO and say that you're not going to buy Facebook like I did because of their Sxsw support, then do so. But the reality is none of this is guaranteed. And the way we think about privacy, and especially the way the generation coming up thinks about privacy, is very different from a lot of us. So it's all the more important to keep held high.
Next question by Orlando Rios. How can this legislation affect business that use social media for marketing?
Sxsw, not so much, but like SOPA, PIPA, I don't know which legislation. I don't know, Orlando. I'm sorry. I mean, the reality is SOPA PIPA was so terribly, there were so many reasons why it was bad, but at the core of it, it was making sites that had user-generated content, and that could have been any of your social media sites. It could have been a blog with comments, depending, I mean, it was pretty poorly written, so depending on how it was interpreted, you could have suddenly been liable for a random comment on your blog that said, hey, do you want to see Chipmunks 3D? I don't know why anyone would want to see that. Here's a link to the torrent. Oh no, we can shut down your site without having to ask any questions, in short.
What can schools and universities do to help promote the importance of the open internet to students?
Hello, Chelsea. What can schools do? Well, so I have to give props to Syracuse. Their program has done a very good job putting the internet at the forefront of like how their students are thinking and learning about the world. And at the end of the day, having a curriculum that is sort of in tune with what is going on presently, the challenge, and you see this in CS department, you see it everywhere, is that the speed with which things change online is so fast that a traditional curriculum doesn't really hold up, textbooks don't hold up, and that whole industry is a racket. I think the best efforts certainly can come from nurturing faculty, or from faculty who are nurturing that in the education, but it comes from the students, right? You don't need to ask that. I think that permissionless innovation that defines the internet can also define the kind of work that you all do. So it is creating a free culture club. It is starting an entrepreneurship club. It is doing all these things that get people thinking about it and the importance of it.
Danielle Zamora asks, what are some of your favorite startups that you're working on right now?
Oh, well, so I helped launch, but I have very little to do with Hipmunk these days, except for evangelizing them at every opportunity. So you should use Hipmunk to book any flight or hotel. One of the others that I'm working with, and I'm lucky enough to be an investor in, that I talked about earlier, was CrowdTilt, because like I said, Kickstarter has done such a great job capturing our imagination for crowdfunding, but they have very, I think, shrewdly focused just on creative projects. And if we look at the success, I mean, look at the Pebble Watch, look at a silly billboard outside of a representative's office. There are so many other ways to use this model of, oh, hey, I like this idea, here's $5. And it could be a tailgate, and it could be a $10 million watch project. I don't know. But I think we're still at the beginning of it, and it's exciting.
Alex Kwan asks, what is your inspiration for your motivation you speak of today?
Wow. It is the fact that on the one hand, I get to meet with and work with entrepreneurs who are so much further ahead than I was when I was their age, and what that means. And I get to, and I mean entrepreneur in the broadest sense, not just people who are startup founders, but people who have started YouTube channels, people who have started blogs, people, the amount of reach people can have now with their ideas is remarkable. And some people have some awesome ideas that otherwise have never gotten the attention that they deserved. And it's really cool when I get to talk to folks who have had, who can say like 100,000 people just saw this video I made, and I feel like it made a difference, because it's really empowering. I think we've spent far too long assuming that this was always just a one-way connection, and yet we have so much to learn from one another, and so much more to do.
What are your thoughts on collaboration via internet, sharing of revenue, more groups like Hit Record, Bible?
I don't know Hit Record or Hit Record probably. Well, the REC looks like the record. Anyway, record button. I don't know. Sharing of revenue, I'm sorry, I don't know about Hit Record or Hit Record. We're gonna have to figure out which one that is. So I can't intelligently answer this. But I do love the idea. I mean, collaboration via the internet is so interesting to me, and again, it's another thing that I feel like we still don't understand anything about. And I can give you a specific example like we saw with Scarlett Garnett, right? Now those two women met each other online. They each had Etsy stores, and they each liked their own work, and they started communicating through, keyboards, and yet they, ended up now opening a business in meat space together. And I think for many of you in the audience, the idea of meeting a total stranger online because you like their Etsy store and then opening a business with them is actually not that far-fetched. If this weren't South by Southwest, if this were maybe back in Washington on Capitol Hill, it might take a little bit more coaxing to help people understand, like, yes, this is a thing, it happens. And it's, I mean, at the core of it, it's special because even if you're not opening a business together, which is a big step, open source is a really good kind of leading indicator for what online collaboration can be, because every one of the sites we can't live without, and probably most of the sites that you're working on right now, could not exist if it weren't for open source software. We are, as the cliche goes, we're standing on the shoulders of giants who have done so much work contributing for free their time and their energy. It's marvelous when you think about what open source has done to make all of this possible, how many other industries could benefit and are benefiting right now from that same spirit and that same idea.
Kelly Krause asks, tell us about your Kickstarter campaign with Lester Chambers.
Well, I gave you the highlights. I can tell you, I saw Lester last week in DC, and he and Dylan performed. Man, he can still play that baby making music. It is remarkable, and he is a man who has had a ton of health problems. I mean, his spirit is just incredible. He has finished recording the album, and he's putting on a show in the second week of April. Where I think we're going to debut, and the album will drop and be available for download. And good news, every dollar minus, I guess, whatever iTunes or Amazon takes will actually go to Lester Chambers for the first time. So I hope you guys will all check that out. It's called Lester's Time Has Come, which shouldn't surprise anyone.
That's awesome. Craig Ligerais asks, I also believe we should be able to see anything and everything, anytime and anywhere. When do you think we'll get there?
Wow, I feel like this is a Google Glass commercial. I don't know. I mean, and this is, I don't know. Not next week. I mean, there is something to be said. I recently learned, how many of you guys know about National Unplug Day? Apparently there's a couple hands. Some reporter asked me, what are you doing for National Unplug Day? And I was so ashamed because I had to say, I don't know what that is. Like, I had to Google it. And apparently it's a thing. I think there is, and I'm being glib about it, but there is a tremendous, tremendous value to being disconnected from these devices. And I like the fact that there are still plenty of sanctuaries where you can, by choice, not have access. Again, for the millions in rural America who can't, not by their own choice, get quality access, that's a different issue. But there's something to be said for that. And I wonder, I don't have kids, I wonder if my goddaughter would feel the same way when she's old enough. I mean, I hope. Again, for a generation, I see her using that iPad, and it's a combination of awe and jealousy, because I know she's gonna grow up, she's gonna be learning how to code by the time she's like 3. I don't know, when do kids learn how to code? And it'll be such a fluency, such a natural fluency for her, and she's gonna do incredible stuff. I just hope her generation also remembers that there is a world outside of the internet. It's not as cool, but it's still there.
Imager asks, what are the next biggest threats to the internet, and how can we prepare for them?
I don't know. It's not going to be as obvious as SOPA or PIPA. I mean, Sxsw is the looming one right now. In fact, you'll see press hits coming out of DC saying, and representatives are concerned that Sxsw may be violating Fourth Amendment rights. So there is attention being paid to this. But you guys should all take a look at the bill and call up your representative and let them know your thoughts. The best way is this kind of vigilance that things like the Internet Defense League provides. They're kind of like digital Minutemen and Minutewomen of the internet. They have a cat signal as well, so you can shine it. There actually were literal cat signals for one event we did, but this idea that you could sign up and be notified should something come down the pipe where you, even if you have a Twitter account with 30 followers, you have a community, you have a Gotham, so to speak, that you want to protect. Until we have an internet lobby, until we have card-carrying members of the internet, just like there are for the NRA or the AARP or these other organizations, I think there will still be a void. There will still be a need here. And if any of you guys want to solve that, that would be awesome, because it is not going to be as obvious. It will be the death by 1,000 cuts. And it's much harder to rally around something that is not as glaringly stupid and detrimental as SOPA or PIPA.
Next question is by Blake Ian. Which online distribution and publishing channels do you think are the most promising for artists to distribute their own work?
Oh, well, okay, this is another, so full disclosure, I'm an investor, but VHX is doing a fabulous job. They looked at Louis C.K., who brilliantly, even though he claims to be a Luddite, brilliantly did the $5 download, right? DRM free, take the wonderful download of my live album, and if you like me, don't pirate it. And it worked, and he made $1 million, and he did it in a week. They took that model and said, okay, we can build this platform so artists like Louis C.K. and filmmakers don't have to do it again. So they did it for Aziz Ansari. They did it for this great film called Indie Game, the movie. And so that one is one that I'm really excited about. Gumroad is another fabulous one. I mean, what is so cool about this is you now have, and this is the big benefit of, so Kickstarter hasn't solved the distribution part, but they've gotten people thinking about creative technology, or sort of technology for creatives. We're at a point now where the market, people on the internet, are definitely digging it, like they get it, they're with it, they're on board, and smart entrepreneurs are building the software that is actually going to enable these artists to do that distribution. So VHX, Gumroad are two awesome ones. I am blanking on others at the moment, so sorry. I'm sure they'll tweet at me and be like, why didn't you mention me? And I'll be like, I'm sorry, I forgot.
It's okay. John Hill asks, during your tour, did you see any great examples of how internet businesses transformed a smaller community?
Interesting. So we didn't visit a ton of smaller communities, and part of that was just timing, because we would naturally get invited. The highest density of people who invited us happened to be clustered around large cities. What was incredible was seeing just how much startups were rejuvenating what were once derelict downtowns. Buildings that were long vacated by larger companies that had gone elsewhere or gone out of business were now being repurposed by startups, being turned into bars, turned into restaurants. The value of creating a startup in downtown, fill in the blank, downtown Lincoln, is that not only do you get all these great jobs, these high-paying jobs, these jobs that really consider and value quality of life, you also attract the businesses that support those employees. So you get the bars and the restaurants and the shops, and you get things like Scarlett Garnet showing up and creating these vibrant downtowns. And that's really, that was the worry of the internet was it's going to put all these companies out of business. And for a period of time, you could argue it had. To see it now kind of coming back, to see internet entrepreneurs being able to take a chance starting an Etsy store without having all the costs of opening a store in real life, or in meat space. But then be able to take that back into the real world, I shouldn't say the real world, into meat space, and be able to build something that is physical and there and present is very cool. But that was, so the reason we didn't see it in the small communities was mostly because we just didn't go there, sorry. But it was a matter of timing. But you saw that guy, Tom, the farmer, Tom Parker, he runs a family farm, which is one of many in America. Family farms typically have a lot of trouble competing with those large agribusinesses, right? Really, really hard to compete at their scale. But the quality of their food is often significantly better, without getting on a soapbox. It just tastes better at the end of the day. I mean, trust me, the eggs that they served us that morning were probably the best eggs I've ever had in my life. And I got to meet the chickens who laid them. And that probably had something to do with it. That family farm, which is in Richmond, Missouri, gets more than 90% of their orders through the internet now. And he's a guy who, Tom said, he's like, I check my email 3 times a week, and thanks to Ag Local, 90% of my orders are coming from the internet. Like, when I saw him speaking so effusively about the value of the internet economy and what it's doing for his family farm, like the oldest industry in America, agriculture, it really, really, really nailed just how important this was to so many Americans.
That's great. Thank you.
Thank you.